that coming up short because I was marginalized, being marginalized again for coming up short because I'm marginalized. Do you get that?
The
It's like,
pain, yeah, totally.
you know,
I 100
and so,
totally can relate.
all right. Hi, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about wellness and flourishing, and it's going to be a sharing about our journey so that we can help our community talk about the important things that are going on in terms of our own personal growth and our own expansion that benefits not just ourselves, our community, and also our society. So we are here. I'm Amaya Tala. I'm a flourishing life practitioner, and we're here with Jasmine Hunt, a diversity and wellness instructor. Is that right?
Yeah,
Practitioner and a
yeah,
yoga instructor.
yep, exactly.
And we are both going to share our main struggles, one of our main struggles in terms of how we're able to really pursue our passion and our joy and our happiness, and how we overcame that, the story, the journey that comes with that, and the lessons learned in terms of that. So, um, do you want to say
Yeah,
something before
yeah,
we start with your sharing, Jasmine?
yeah. No, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I do want to simply ground us in a little bit of timeline because when we met, this was in March, I want to say, of 2022.
Okay, yeah,
So
around.
maybe, yeah, around that time we connected over learning the Filipino language, Tagalog, and like we started to connect after those courses that you taught to the community. And that was when I really started to have this experience of like understanding and being introduced and really experiencing like community and learning and growth. And we just continued to, I mean, you've coached me through so many things in my life. And I feel like I've really been able to actually apply the tools and the things that we talk about every month and then come back to you with like updates on the outcomes. And I've seen so many great things come from that. So I'm so glad that we can just do this and finally get together because our conversations are truly valuable. Like
Yeah.
there's so much that we gain from it one on one
Yeah.
that we just felt like it's so great to be able to share that with others. So,
Exactly. I think there's a lot more wisdom that comes out when you come together and just talk it out. Because it's like we don't really have like a strict agenda about like our conversation. This just really comes from the heart. And there's a lot of things I actually find out about myself just by talking with you. And there's a lot of like nuggets and gems of wisdom that I really truly feel like, oh, I hope other people hear this because it's just between the two of us, but it's like it's good for other people to hear because we're a community and we're healing as a community. And a lot of people are also going through similar things that we're going through. So
yeah,
I think it's really good that we're, sharing this.
yeah,
So definitely it's been a journey between the two of us. And I think that relational healing is really different because a lot of us, especially people who are going through the same type of work, we usually do this on our own, but then at some point you really need to open up and be part of a community where you get to see yourself through the eyes of other people who are also sharing your own vision and journey. So me with Jasmine is a very humble person because she's like she thinks she's the one like learning about so many things, but actually I've learned so many things from you just from your own character and just being a teacher of openness and like really taking in and being humble enough to really look at situations from a fresh perspective and really being honest with yourself and taking the responsibility and the accountability to correct the things that you feel like, oh, I need to be changing this so that I can move to the right direction that is good for myself and also for my family and my community. And it takes quite an individual to really um have that kind of approach to life. And in
yeah,
that way, you're really a great teacher because it's not something that's very dominating. Oh, I know everything. It's really more of like, oh, I'm open to learn about these things with an open heart and
Right.
open ears and opening my soul to this and
Right.
letting my
Right.
soul hear that. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I really learned from you. Honestly, I'm really
Yeah.
grateful for that.
No, I appreciate that a ton because I actually do see life that way when it comes to every facet of my life, whether that's me in the workplace, me in relationships with other people, friendships, family, my own business. I know the same for you too, is I'm an avid believer that everything kind of folds in on each other. Everything kind of cascades into the next component. So even when I'm not at work, a lot of what I took from work, I'm applying into my interpersonal life, and what I'm taking from my interpersonal life, I apply that to my business. And so I think that it's our job as human beings to find the lessons and not, I don't want to overcomplicate things, but I'm not one to oversimplify because I think that you have to be open to the duality of life. And there is so much nuance and so much complexity and duality that in these situations, I find myself not being able to always find like the one answer to a situation. It's usually a process of like acceptance, understanding, letting go. Like, usually there's not just a simple like reaction to things, it's like a whole
Mhm.
cascade of emotions that you kind of have to go through and be willing to do that work. And I don't think a lot of people these day and age have the time or energy or feel the need to, but with the tools that we've talked about, we have found ways to kind of amplify that or like, replicate and be able to manage through those conflicts a little bit more effectively. And
Yeah.
that's what this space has been for me. Like, so I've learned so much from you. Maybe just, I don't know how much you've learned from me, but I appreciate
But
that. But yeah, we've learned a lot from each other. So
yeah. And it takes,
yeah.
I think the beautiful thing about it is that it takes a quite, a bit of like bravery and like guts for someone to maintain their pureness, I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
because with dealing with duality from my own experience, you really need to, I have realized that I needed to make sure that I keep my kind of innocence and my
Mm-hmm.
like subtlety and gentleness
Yeah.
with being able to kind of like water, like being able to go around the obstacles instead of
Yeah.
fighting it. Because with duality, it's very, I feel like sometimes it can be a very intense energy and dynamic that if you're tackling it with intensity or ego or closeness, you're not really gonna, you might hurt yourself in the
Yeah.
long run.
a
And
hundred
so
percent.
keeping that gentleness, I feel like, is a tool to
Yeah.
actually be able to navigate the obstacles that we are facing as people who are trying to make a change in the world.
Right. And I
You know?
think it reminds me of like this idea around, like, I know in the beginning of the year, one of the goals I had was to work on my fifth chakra, like the throat chakra. And we both talked about this.
Yeah.
And I think the duality is something that really helps people or people like me within my specific identity to be less afraid to share our voice. Because when I have this mindset of like duality, then I'm creating space for me to be able to make mistakes, be imperfect, look at what I have accomplished or what I was effective in, but also look for the other areas of improvement that I could also, bring into my life. And I think the duality is kind of key, is one of the biggest mindsets I think that could be beneficial to anyone that's like kind of struggling with sharing their true feelings or expressing themselves, like whether that's in the workplace or what have you. But I'm curious to know from you, like in your experience, like, we talk about the BIPOC experience, and I don't know if folks are familiar with the term, but BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we have different experiences around that. So I don't know. I thought I'd just see what you think and what your perspective is, in your
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that's coming up to me actually with the story that I wanted to share, I did note here. Let me look at my notes about
Oh, yeah.
duality, which is interesting because I noted it in my notes here, but okay, where is it? Anyway, my computer is slow right now, but
No, I mean, I can,
um,
as you're
it
looking
has
for it. Oh,
something to do. Okay,
as you're
anyway,
looking, I can share a little bit.
it's okay.
Okay.
It has something to do with so I wanted to talk about like one of the struggles that I have as a BIPOC person in pursuing the journey that I want to, like, to be free, is the feeling of being marginalized.
Mm.
And it's this kind of like, if before I thought it was just like, oh, this is what my ancestors went through. Um, this is just the story. This is the story that was passed on to me. This is just me. I just need to keep fighting. I just need to be, I did, force myself to speak up because I'm in the marginalized part of this community. So I need to speak louder. I need to speak faster. I need to be whatever. Like, I needed to kind of force myself. And then I realized later on, and the harder thing about that is being marginalized for being marginalized. And the way I want to explain that is, I had this encounter with someone where I, as a marginalized person, we were not given the resources and the knowledge and access to things that would make us not marginalized. Because it's like, so when we're trying to pursue our passions and our happiness and our purpose, sometimes we come up short because we didn't have the resources. We're struggling. We don't have the knowledge wasn't passed down to us in a direct way because they were lost, they were erased. Like, where are we gonna go? Like, and so
Yeah.
as a healer, as like a healer, a coach, a practitioner, I did not get those things that I need, the tools that I needed easily. And so, and I had to really scramble to find those resources. And sometimes when I find those resources, I don't have the resources to access those resources.
Yeah. No,
And so,
straight up. And
plus the time that I have to be able to even study those resources, I don't have, because I need to work. Right. I need to work an hourly wage just so I can pay my bills.
Yeah.
So I don't even have the time to be, I know as a BIPOC person, I want to be politically correct with the words that I use, with, this is the label, I want to know those things. I want to know the history of like other cultures. I want to know all of those things. But I'm put in a situation where I need to work most of the time. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy because it's sucked in and drained by the work that I do. And I don't have the time for those things, even if my heart, my intention wants to. And so there was a situation where I came up short. I wasn't able to give the right answer to someone's question because as a practitioner, I didn't know the answer. So as a person of color who are in the marginalized part of the society, that coming up short because I was marginalized, being marginalized again for coming up short because I'm marginalized. Do you get that?
The pain, like, yeah, totally. I 100
and so
totally can relate.
Connecting that to the duality is, I'm learning now, maybe this is one of the tools that I learned, that accepting my imperfection, accepting, because it's really hard. It's really hard because as a person of color, you want to be the best. You want to part of being just, attaining justice is to be able to be your best, to really serve your community. We don't want to let our community down. But I'm learning, and I'm still in the process of learning, that my shortcomings is part of my story. And the imperfection that comes with me is part of my story, and it's part of my purpose. And there's a duality there, that we want to be our best regardless of our circumstances, even if we're working in a very uneven playing field where
Mm.
most of the stacks are against us. We try our best to really, better ourselves, to train ourselves and everything. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is being gentle with myself is
Right.
another thing that I learned. And that's the duality that you brought into this conversation. And I was
Yeah.
reminded of that because I put that in my notes before this conversation.
Yeah.
And learning to navigate those two, accepting myself for my imperfections, which makes it holistic. And doing that and practicing that helped me. It feels better. It feels like I came back to myself.
Yeah.
It feels like it feels like I'm not within my internal self. I'm not marginalized because
Yeah.
I've centered myself, which is another term that I learned from you, Jasmine, centering yourself. I've centered myself into my own story and into my own perspective, that in my head, because I've accepted my imperfection in my story, I am not marginalized
Right.
in my
Right.
own story.
Yeah.
And really, sometimes the way that I see myself and we see ourselves is sometimes the most important thing before it may be more important than how other people see us.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that, the struggles that I went through as a person of color, is that reframing of the term being marginalized and how to kind of like change that story in my head and in my perspective by accepting and loving myself, like the self-love practices.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah. No, and I am so grateful that you shared that, because I think so many people can relate to just the situation within a situation. Like, yeah, we're having a lived experience, but then in our own communities, we haven't been able to sometimes reach the levels or conquer the mountain, as they say, like in the ways that we want to, simply because in our lineages, we have been gassed. Like we have experienced oppressions, we've experienced hardships, other challenges. And a lot of times people kind of come into these conversations, well, I mean, are you in any danger now? Like, do you experience that now? Aren't you, a living, breathing, free citizen? And the answer is yes. But if you look at sort of what happens in households, if you look at households and what happens in those deeper moment to moment interactions that you're having with your loved ones, you would probably, if you investigate and explore that much deeper, you will see that a lot of some of the behaviors, practices, culture, expectations, obligations, a lot of this is all fragmented and passed down through various forms of oppression and supremacy. So like, people feeling like they have to keep their head down and work. These narratives we keep alive in our households, and then they live in there, and then we go out in the world and we have these mindsets. And then we are on top of that expected to remove that mindset and flourish.
yeah.
And I think flourish, in the work that you do as a flourishing life, practitioner and coach and healer, is helped me to see where that narrative has been like kind of stuck, because it's like a trapped energy. It's stuck energy, that needs to be assessed and honored, but also like processed in the appropriate ways. And I think, one of the things that kind of came to my mind around like the duality is, the same thing where my brain is having to do two sets of homework pretty much every room I'm in. Usually, when I started out teaching and working, I was with a lot of law enforcement. Most of the time, I was usually the only woman, the only person of color, and the only young millennial in these spaces. And so, if you want to talk about things stacked against you, and the political, social things that were happening in that time. This was 2018, 19, and 2020. And this was a lot going on in the pandemic. We had just seen the whole, country going through civil unrest. And, you know, when you mentioned showing up for your community, doing the yoga was a way for me to share my voice and come out of that fucking shell, of like, okay, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe they're going to think I'm crazy or what have you. And you know what the funny thing about that is all my fears came true. I did receive survey feedback from these people who, serve and protect us, right? And I appreciate, the ones that really hold themselves accountable in their roles. But at that time, a lot of the feedback I got was, she's a detriment to this class. She should not be teaching this class. She's not loud enough. She's not a leader. She should not be here. And it's funny because in that spiritual walk that I had to go through, that was the test to see if I have enough understanding of duality. Because if
Mm.
you don't have duality top of mind, you will let most things derail you. And so this test of duality is like, yeah, Jasmine, you're receiving this feedback, but look at where you are. You're not among your own right now. You are in a world and in a space that thinks differently, acts differently, expects differently. Not that those things are bad, but that you have to understand your audience and like who you're working with. And that was an accountability thing for me as a practitioner, was like, oh, everyone I work with, I may not always agree with, or I may not always understand fully, or even feel comfortable around. I felt so out of place. And here I was doing yoga and trying to get these men to move their bodies. And like, I didn't feel respected sometimes because they would laugh and all of these things that I had to kind of regulate on my own. I didn't have someone doing the same thing as me at that time, or a friend even in the business doing that, or in the industry, and saying, yeah, we can do this together. I didn't have any other women of color yoga teachers to pull
Mm.
me aside and say, hey, don't worry about this, let it roll off your back, whatever. And so for a while there, my voice was kind of stifled, and I do think I suffered a great harm. And I actually eventually left that job because, not that I didn't love the work, but I truly felt that I wasn't going to be in the right environment to grow, and do the things that I wanted to do, and help the community in the way that I wanted to help the community. It served the purpose, and I'm forever grateful. I learned so much, and it has been a part of my DNA as a practitioner around leadership, because I've been around so many leaders for so long that I could pull in the duality, right? What are the good parts of this work? What are the great
Yeah.
things that I'm bringing in to my voice? And the one thing I want to take away is that usually I learned very early on that if there was a skill set I wanted, or I saw someone, there were some guys and there were some police officers that I would look at and I'd be like, man, they've got it all. They've just got this walk when they walk in the room. What the hell is that? Why do they have so much charm? Why are they such a, so reputable, and they don't even say a word? What is that X factor? And a lot of what I had to realize was, if you want a skill set and you want something, but you don't have it quite yet, understand that it is yours. It is coming to you because you want it, simply because you said you like that and you respect it. What stifles that away from you is when there's envy or pain, jealousy, hurt, hatred, things like that kind of push those energies away from you. You see something you want, the universe already starts to put in your mind. And I just know that it's going to take a few years. I'm not going to get it today. And
Yeah.
that's the duality, I think, that has helped me realize, like, okay, you share your voice. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Yeah. And the feedback they gave me, maybe I take 40%, not 60, not the whole 100, but maybe
Yeah.
there is a sliver there of like, maybe I do need to be louder and project my voice.
Hmm.
Maybe it's not harm, it hurts to hear, but how can I just cook a little bit of the ingredients and bring it into my life? And so, I know we've talked about these stories and tools and all these things, that have like really influenced our
Yeah.
our styles, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a little bit of like kind of the voice, and like, and there's more stories to
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah. And we have a 10
yeah.
minutes.
Hmm.
So it's just amazing how
Yeah.
I think the duality part comes also with, because there's a change we want to make. And
Mhm.
when there's a change that we want to make, it means that there's something that needs to be changed and the new change. And usually those two energies are not going to be the same or not going to be complement. And so when there's this old world that is used to doing things a certain way, and then we come in, definitely we're bringing something very different, and there's kind of like a clash there. And it's interesting that we're brought in this world to kind of remind the old world that of like the things that are often overlooked in the, and this is something that's coming up to me now, just now in this conversation, things that are usually overlooked by society in terms of like the raw truth about, in terms of the raw truth about being human. And I think, you know, learning to accept yourself, learning that it is a process to learn things, that you're gonna make mistakes, that you're gonna initially you're not gonna be perfect. It's the story of kind of like there's a term about that, kind of like
hero's journey.
Hero's journey, and like rising above your limitation, becoming your best self, in other words. So it's like that journey it takes a certain level of humanness to remind people that we need to respect that process, instead of like being punishing people for trying to be their best self, their best authentic self. I think the old community is very used to kind of like have this expectation of a perfect, you need to be this, you need to be that, you need to, without really considering like the natural progression of becoming a better person as like naturally.
It's like leaning into just the natural process of becoming a better person, because it's like we kind of want those things quickly and like accessible to us, and like it's frustrating when it's like not going as quickly as you want it to. I know I have felt that like so desperately, like in meetings and workshops and facilitations where I just don't feel like I'm amounting to much. It's kind of, and it's weird because like sorry to jump in. I just want to say, like, as someone who's I would consider myself athletic, but like I want to always outdo my own time. And so I'm looking for that. I know that perfectionism like creeps in, you know, but that is rigidity. That is not organic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the main lesson so we're wrapping up now, the main lesson that we can take away from this is that a lot of us in this same line of work is we tend to be really hard on ourselves, and we tend to cover the things that make us human in the way that this process unfolds. Right. Like a lot of us are very gentle. A lot of us are soft-spoken. Maybe not everyone. And it's okay however people, you know, approach things. If you're soft-spoken or not, fast or slow, it's, you know, everything is accepted. Right. But maybe for some, you know, just as an example, for some like people who are soft-spoken, has a different type of leadership qualities, maybe they're nurturing, they're not really dominant, they're not really like, you know, hard. Some people try to hide those because it's not very popular, it's not accepted, it's not, you know, but the thing is, this kind of leadership, this kind of being, this kind of showing up to the world brings a different contribution to the world, brings a different energy. And I think the dualistic part of it is kind of like, yes, we can accept the current world as it is, and kind of like look at it from an objective perspective, but at the same time loving yourself for the different energy that you're bringing, and really cultivating that and owning that, and really respecting yourself and loving yourself, and taking the time to really center yourself, and not relying on the old world to approve that. The old world is probably marginalizing us.
Right. Well, because it's the messaging, right? Like, you're so right. The messaging you receive from society on like what is the right thing and what's the best, how you should be, like how fast you should speak, how loud you should speak, you know, like what kind of words are appropriate and right to use. I mean, all of that is messaging, And you have to question and push back on like, okay, how have I been socialized here? And am I, how is that affecting me, internally and the way that I create and like share myself? Because I think that's one of the biggest things is we don't know how to push back and question the norm, the status quo, and that's kind of why I think diversity work is so, it's so important, along with the wellness work. But anyway, we should talk
Yeah.
about the strategies and the tools. I'm
Yeah.
excited to do that.
We'll do that in the next recording.
Okay.
So if you're interested in like learning more about these strategies and tools in terms of how to center yourself, go to our next recording and you'll learn more. And again, I'm Amaya Tala, Flourishing Life Practitioner, and
I'm Jasmine Hunt, wellness educator, yoga instructor, diversity practitioner,
and everything else.
All the other rainbow things.
Oh, yes, exactly. So I hope you learned something from this conversation. I hope you were engaged. If you have any comments, just please put them in the comments and we would love to engage with you. And until next time, we'll see you in the other recording.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.